On today's news, a former WWE wrestler has teased an in-ring return, last-minute changes to Raw, future plans for Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, plus Ollie's review of Raw. Hey, do you come here often? You don't? Well, you should. Hit that subscribe button and enable notifications so you can get updated for future videos and keep up to date with the latest news.
Support WrestleTalk!
Cast your mind back to the Performance Center era of WWE programming in early to mid 2020. I know, it's awful. And you might remember a pretty heated rivalry between Bayley and Sasha Banks and the Kabuki Warriors that ended with Kairi Sane being written off TV entirely. Reports from the time indicated that Kairi had become a Japanese ambassador for WWE, and not much has been heard of her in terms of wrestling since. However, that might be about to change, as Kairi Sane in-ring return confirmed. Notice I didn't say WWE return there, because as it turns out, she might have left the company. Kairi has recently removed the WWE portion of her Instagram handle, and has updated her bios on Twitter and Instagram to say former WWE superstar. Note that while her Twitter handle still currently is at Kairi Sane WWE, changing Twitter handles can result in the removal of verification and the like, so it usually requires a bit more care and communication with the platform. Not only this, but Kairi has also hinted at a potential return to the ring, responding to a fan on Twitter who said they hope to see Kairi in a ring again someday with a simple winking emoji. Oof, you tease. The former NXT Women's Champion is sure to be a hit whatever she chooses to do, so best of luck to her. It's been a little while since we've reported about last-minute changes and torn up scripts and the like for WWE shows, isn't it? Do you think that's because they stopped, or because that just became the norm and it wasn't news anymore? I think it's the latter. But it's that time once more, as according to Fightful on last night's episode of Raw, the opening match of Kevin Owens versus Big E in a steel cage was originally going to main event the show. This was reportedly the case until around 4 hours before the show began, when it was moved to the start of the show in place of the Raw Women's Championship match between Becky Lynch and Liv Morgan. According to the report, the original opening segment was a Seth Rollins in-ring promo, so just think about the potential laughs we missed out on. John, oh, it sounds terrible when I'm a bit ill and bunged up. It sounds awful. And speaking of other competitors in the WrestleMania 31 main event, what a segue, Pete. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns are still feuding. Yep, that's still happening. After their match at Crown Jewel, they have another one coming up at Day 1. Now, some might have thought that this would be the culmination of the feud, with the following pay-per-view being the Royal Rumble, where Reigns could get a new challenger to his Universal title and could organically move on from Lesnar. Oh, you poor, naive individuals. According to the Wrestling Observer, the plans for Lesnar and Reigns are for them to have a series of matches, with the Day 1 bout being yet another installment in this series. So Lesnar versus Reigns at WrestleMania, right? Gotta keep the trend going. If that does happen, it'll be the third WrestleMania headlined by Lesnar and Reigns. Austin versus Rock, this is not. And now it's time for Ollie's review of Raw in about 5 minutes.
Thanks for your support on Patreon, Mad Mac the Meat Father and Double L Liam Leonard. Look, a steel cage, everybody! We have no idea what we're doing! The show opened with Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens and Big E getting direct-to-camera backstage promos. Their feud might have the best concentration of talkers in WWE right now, because to kick things off, it's a random, unannounced KO versus Big E cage match. The cage kind of makes sense with the three men interfering in each other's matches for over a month, but it also undermines the stipulation, which would have felt more impactful set up in the episode and paid off as a main event. But try Sane undermined the cage stipulation to KO though, who fought, as always, like a man wrestling his last match. Because I guess maybe he is? Big E won after almost 20 minutes with a second rope big ending, escaping through the door. While the cage was hot-shotted, this was another great in-ring match between them, and a decent chapter in one of the most coherent stories in the company right now. So quick! Add a Bobby Lashley. Raw comes back from a break and all three men are laying dead around the ring after that steel cage match because Bobbles have randomly run down and laid everyone out. Him and MVP later explained it's because they feel disrespected not being included, so expect that neat little triple threat at Day 1 to become a fatal four-way. Zelina Vega then beat Getting Further Away from a Superhero, Nikki Almost a Superhero in about 2 minutes. Nikki's spirits were briefly lifted by a fan asking for her autograph backstage message afterwards, but psych! It was actually for Jerry Lawler, who was standing right behind her. Was that in Jerry's contract or something? If I return for a cheap hometown pop, it has to involve a young woman asking me for my autograph. I'm still relevant, groupies are still relevant, Memphis forever! Where'd you get that jacket from, bud? It's real nice, looks real nice on you. Just when you think Randy Orton and Riddle's act might start getting stale with tag team matches that go nowhere, they geniusly announced the RK Bronament, Riddle's idea, for which there'd be special correspondence where he even got Randy to put on a blazer. The first round match was AJ Styles and Omos versus the Street Profits. AJ seemingly had it won, but an angered Omos tagged himself in to beat up the Profits and got them both counted out. Omos then stormed off afterwards, furthering their breakup angle from last week. Riddle then did some great work building up Randy's post-match analysis, which was just him saying, nope. Later on, the Mysterios beat Alpha Academy when Dominic was beaten up for ages, then got a lucky pin on Chad Gable. Get out of there, Chad, while you still have your youth! With no Randy there, Otis scoop slammed Riddle afterwards in frustration. Riddle even manages to get laid out in his own tournament in a match he's not even wrestling in. Rather than the Priest becoming Damien's story from the last month, Damian Priest just had a really decent match against Bobby Roode. In an alternate timeline, this could have been for the NXT Championship. Priest won, but Dolph Ziggler beat him up afterwards. I'm into a Dolph versus Priest feud. Doudrop got the most time yet to show how good she is on the main roster, going over 5 minutes with Bianca in a back and forth match. They worked it effectively, with the crowd getting to their feet for a near KOD spot, but then WWE blue-balled them all with Doudrop escaping and taking the lame count-out loss. At least that KOD tease worked incredibly. It'll be awesome when it's eventually hit. Miz hosted Edge on Miz TV, where he called him out first for going soft, for saying nice things about him last week, but then also wanted to know where was that compassion in 2006, when Miz was being hazed in the locker room. It was a nice use of shoot material, but unfortunately, all the realism of Ken Loach's entire filmography probably wouldn't make me excited for their match, which they booked for themselves at day one. Veer Mahan is still coming, everybody! Oh, thank God, I thought he wasn't for a second there. Nice to have these reminders. But before then, we have the latest episode of everyone's favorite odd couple sitcom, the very, 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 very old guy Vince McMahon and his selfie-loving nephew, Austin Theory. Leaning into his role, Vince has now adopted the cadence and mannerisms of Groucho Marx, complete with slow comedic eye rolls and finger tapping. This week, Vince said Austin would have a match, which was a surprise. But because Austin expected the surprise, the match was pulled, because it was no longer a surprise. What is the lesson I'm supposed to learn here? So because there was no longer a match, Vince said Austin would have to find another way to impress him. Which, yes, you are right, that is the dialogue of a gay porno, and Austin responded by unzipping his top and started doing some sexy jumping jacks. Which, yes, also is the visuals of a gay porno. Vince shouted for Austin to use his brains instead, by which he presumably meant his ass, because Vince lingered on watching that after Theory walked out the door. I'd like to give him a big push. Austin's big idea was to jump Finn Balor after his victory over T-Bar. In an alternative timeline, that would have been a great NXT Championship match. Dana Brooke was approached by the usual 24/7 title jabronis. I'm pretty sure Reggie tried to hit on her. Smash those glass ceilings, Dana. Now women can be turned into comedy jobbers by the 24/7 title too. Equality! Thankfully, the main event properly addressed that balance with an incredibly well-presented women's title match between Becky Lynch and Liv Morgan. The in-ring action was okay, but the framing of the fight, it being 17 years since Trish Stratus versus Lita main evented Raw, Liv getting a really good video package before her entrance, recapping her childhood, having an interview with her mum, the commentators calling the action with gravitas, and the surprisingly invested crowd elevated this match significantly. But Becky cheated to win yet again, holding the rope to retain, giving us the latest version of Mizgal, where her dad appears to be laughing at her being upset. It is a bit tiring seeing Becky win like this. Again. But I think this serves the overall story. Morgan has now proved herself to Lynch because Becky had to cheat and can go into day one with self-belief. What did you think of Raw? Let me know in the comments. 80% of you voted for it should have been Liv in our poll on a poll match on the community tab. The opening cage match, the arcade bronament, and the presentation of the main event were all really well done. And everything else in between was okay. This week's Raw is 4 out of 5, actually making it by default One of the best episodes of the year. It's been a tough year. Now find out what happened to Jeff Hardy over the weekend in Laurie's news.
After spending most of the match in the ring, he was said to be more and more sluggish as the contest wore on, eventually making a hot tag to Drew and just immediately walking out through the crowd flanked by security. He didn't return to the ring to celebrate when his team eventually won either.